tell me a little bit more about your meditation. Are you able to get prior to mind and body, right? Because that's the big difference between self-inquiry and meditation, right? Meditation, you're focusing on your breath or your mind control or chanting, so there's sound. And this is dropping prior to that, right? So this is letting everything go. And there seems to be like this back and forth of knowledge, like gaining knowledge to turn within, gaining knowledge and turning within, right? And so the none of it's all the listening and the walking in nature, right? That's part of like the knowledge gathering, but the true experience happens prior to all of that in the silence, right? And your mind is going to always want to not be in the silence. It's going to always want to be like in the knowledge gathering phase, because that's just how we're taught too. We're taught that this answer lies in something, right? And so we're continuing to gather and grab and continue to look, and that's all fine. And that's part of the process. But at some point, you're going to be able to be comfortable with, I guess is a good term to say, goodbye, world. I'm going prior to you. And I'm curious if that's where you are in your self-inquiry or meditation. You're dropping prior to mind and resting and being. Do you know if you are, or?
I don't. It's an amazing question, and to me, that's the holy grail. If there's a goal, that would be the goal. It's what I've always struggled with because I'm so obviously in my head. So with the longer meditations, I think I touched that spot a little bit. So with the longer meditations, I spend the first 10, 15 minutes just following my breath. And that allows me to, the body mind sort of, relax and let the mud settle, for that metaphor. And then I start dropping in the questions, who am I? Or if one, that doesn't last very long before thoughts come. And then as I'm thinking, I'll be thinking about what I have to do for the day or this or that. And I'll say, well, who is the one that thinks? Who is this one that's thinking? Yes. And I'll kind of cycle back between those two. But I can only, and this is what I really wanted to ask you, like, I can only do that for about 20 minutes. I'm guessing, I'm not looking at the clock. Then, I'll get sort of lost in thought. So I'll go back to the breath for 10 minutes and then I'll come back to who am I? And I'll say to myself, it's more of a feeling now, but it's like, don't answer that question from the mind. Just sort of drop it into the still pond. And then, when it feels right, I ask it again. And then if I notice thoughts, who is the one that thinks? It's like a hodgepodge, and then if that doesn't work, I'll start doing it's called ascension mantra. It's essentially a gratitude practice. Like if I'm getting, and then, now what happened this morning, which has happened before. I'm sorry. The last thing I do is I'll say just this, rest in being, it'll start with as kind of a mantra and then it sort of just fades into being silence. But, only like once a week on these longer meditations do I sort of drop into that sort of emptiness for maybe, who knows, there's no time there, 5 seconds. Yeah. And then it's like, ooh, was that it? Was that it? So anyway, it's really helpful to be listening to the Rupert stuff because he's talking about self-inquiry directly. And that's why I'm always, see, that's a perfect example. Like my meditation feels unstructured and I can only ask the who am I for like a couple minutes and then I get distracted and then I'll remember and I'll say, who am I? So
Yep, that's part of it, Greg. I mean, you are doing it. That's part of the process, is understanding the so-called difference between your mind going away from yourself and you experiencing yourself. 5 seconds is a long time relative to no time, as it was before. Right? And that 5 seconds will turn into 6 seconds, will turn into 7, will turn into 30, I mean, it's the relentless pursuit of effortlessness. So in the absence of doing, in the absence of effort, what remains is what you're after. Right? So in meditation, notice the absence of the present moment. Right? Notice that the absence of movement and the absence of effort it takes to remain still. Right? So it's an action that doesn't have any movement. It's a doing that is silent. This is the paradoxical piece of all of this. It's in that the relinquishing is the gain happens. And so in that relinquishing, notice the absence of effort, and notice that nobody does that. Once you realize that nobody does effortlessness, and yet it's still happening because you're experiencing that directly, you're onto it. You're approaching what is being pointed to, because you don't disappear. You can't disappear. What remains in the silence? What remains in the silence is the presence of you, of being, of stillness. And so your attention goes from mindful activity or bodily activity to the noticing of the presence that remains in the absence of action. Because it's all about, I mean, Rupert, these are Rupert words and Ramana Maharshi words and stuff. It's what remains after everything else has been relinquished is what you're after. And all that remains is a presence. It's an experience of yourself. So there's a flipping of mind, I would like to say. It's not a flipping of mind. It's a flipping of attention away from the body and mind back to the presence that remains in the stillness. You're after the presence. You're after this, you could almost say it's like a buzzing of being. I mean, there's something there.
Yeah.
And so that's where you are. You are still primarily out in mind and body, and that's okay. That's how it works. And these 5 seconds eventually will turn into a long enough time frame to where you'll be able to experience the being, right? Because you flip in, you touch it, and you bounce back out.
Yeah.
But given 5 or 10 seconds or 15 seconds, eventually you'll go, I just experienced my own presence. And that's everything. That is everything that's being pointed to, is that you experience your own being. Being experiences itself. Or presence experiences itself. Just another way of saying that you, yourself, experiences itself. And It sounds to me like you are off to the races, man. You've got a practice that doesn't chew into your day. It's been proven to be just as restful, if not more. And you might get 5 seconds out of it now, but this is what it's all about: perseverance. It's the relentless pursuit of effortlessness. And what happens is that the more you hang there, the more you get it. Like something gets it. It gets itself. Like, oh, I get it. Yeah, I want to be here. I want my attention here because this is where the beautiful, perfect stillness lays. So I can experience this and still go out in the world and live life. That's living.
Yeah. Yeah.